During the awakening process, there's a lot of different things that can happen. And in this video today, we're going to talk about the different ways that you can stay grounded during this process. So, first, I want to go over some of the things that you may start to experience during this process. So, one of the things that can start to happen is that you start to learn about things that you thought were true are no longer true. And you kind of have to start reconciling this in your mind. You also may start to go down different rabbit holes, and you may start to get overwhelmed and a little obsessive about doing research on different topics. And another thing that can start to happen is that you may start to have a hard time being around other people because you are changing internally and you need to process that. The other thing that is a real big one is that you can become more sensitive to energy, and you also may have your psychic abilities start to open up. So, one of the things that is very important to learn during this whole process is how to stay grounded. So, in this video, I'm going to go through those different topics and different techniques to help you manage when you go through these things. So, one of the first things that you may start to experience is that information mental overload. So, a lot of times, what ends up happening is you start going through this awakening and you're looking up topics, you're watching videos, you're just reading books, you're just digging and digging and digging. And the one thing that is very important to do during this process, because you're completely mentally overstimulated, is to do something physical. So, this is going to help you get back into your physical body and help you discharge all that mental energy. So, doing anything physical that you enjoy, it could be walking or jogging or going to play football or basketball, anything that's will help you get out of your mind and start to focus on what you're doing with your body is going to really help you get back into your body and, help you get more balanced and centered. Another interesting thing that you can do is, you may have been focusing on all of these different topics that you've come across and you're, doing all this research. But rather than, do that kind of thing where it kind of keeps you in these types of loops where you're just like mentally going and churning and processing, one of the things that you can do is to, instead of going down those rabbit holes, maybe just pick up a fictional book and just start really getting into that story. So that way, you kind of turn off or turn down the volume of this, really mentally stressful mind that's going on and kind of get really engaged in a story. Something imaginative, something, or it could be even, a hobby that you've been wanting to learn more about. Just anything that is not something that is going to be causing you to think so much is one option. Another thing that can happen is you start to realize that you have been engaging in draining or tedious conversations. So, when it comes to being around people that are draining, I think this is the biggest thing that we need to learn is how to assert boundaries. A lot of times, what ends up happening during this process is we just have not been aware of this, or we have just been, going through our entire life not realizing that we come away from conversations drained. And so during the awakening process, this is a lot of times what we start learning. We start learning about the concept of energy and how when we interact with people, that they are either draining our energy or they are, lifting us up, but we're becoming more aware of what happens when we interact with people. And so, for these people that we interact with that, they talk excessively and we're spending a lot of mental energy just trying to keep up with their conversation. And, being an active listener takes a lot of energy. Other things that they can do is, maybe they're talking negatively and, that's kind of like lowering your energy. So, one of the things that you can do is you can just start asserting your boundaries and you can, rather than continue on in this in a conversation that you find draining, You can, start saying, I'm sorry, I've got work to do, or I need to make a phone call, I've got an appointment. Anything that you can do to help minimize that interaction, because during this awakening process, you are already mentally stimulated. And when you go into environments or situations where you are being drained even further, that's really just going to take you further off the path. And so learning about these interactions with people and how you can manage your energy exchange with people is going to be very helpful. And learning to, be assertive is also part of this process, because a lot of times many of us had no idea. And especially for empaths, this can be a very trying time, because empaths are already sensitive. And when you add in awakening where you become even more sensitive, then this can be something that you really need to learn. Now, another thing that can start to happen is you can become more aware of your interactions with people that, you have conversations that you don't find interesting, or they're more tedious and boring. So, what ends up happening is a lot of times you used to be able to engage in conversations with people, and they were tolerable. But when you're awakening, all of a sudden these conversations become intolerable, because your mind is already mentally overwhelmed, but you're also, in this state where you're questioning your entire existence sometimes. So when you start talking about people to people, and they want to talk about, something that one of their kids did over the weekend, or a recipe that they made, you may start to just feel like, I've got this existential crisis going on in my mind. Um, and so this can be challenging. And I think one of the things that you can do is to try to learn to basically learn how to be fully present. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity, because it will happen where you just find yourself like wanting to zone out because you've got so many things on your mind. But this is an opportunity to get you back in your body and back in the moment, and really be there and engage with people. And I know it's hard, believe me, I know how hard it can be. And then the other alternative to that is finding people that enjoy talking about spiritual topics. And that will really help you balance internally. So, yes, you have, these normal day to day conversations, but you can also, have people that you can talk about with these spiritual topics, so that you're not so, one way or the other, that you've got that kind of outlet so that you can feel balanced internally. And, this can be challenging for a lot of people, because as we go through this process, we are changing ourselves, and we're learning how to navigate this. And, if we don't have people around us that are already awake or are awakening, then it can be challenging trying to find people that we resonate with. So, one of the things that you can do is you can, first go ahead and put the tension out to the universe that you want to find people that are more spiritually awake. You can also look online and try to find if there's any spiritual conferences out there that you find interesting. Most likely, you're going to find people that you enjoy and you resonate with. You can also look for some alternative type of health facilities in your area. Maybe even just going to a yoga studio. Most people that are focused on their health are also going to be more spiritually aligned. So you can look for classes that you can attend. You can also go to, metaphysical stores and see if they have any kind of classes that they offer on the weekends. A lot of times these stores will offer different classes on different topics, and, that's another good way to meet people. So when you find people that you can, kind of toss these ideas with, and, you find that it's going to be very, very balancing for you. And so that is ideal, to try to find other like-minded people. Another thing that can start to happen during your awakening is that you become more sensitive to energy, and you may have your third eye open, or have your psychic abilities start to open up. And so what ends up happening is you just start to become more aware of the concept of energy. You become more aware of your own energy, of other people's energy, of different things that impact your energy. And this could be from your habits to health, where you live. I mean, there's all sorts of different things that can impact your energy. So, when it comes to becoming sensitive to energy in general, I would say the best thing that you can do is to learn energy clearing and protection techniques. And practice those daily. So, these are basically intentional thought exercises that clear out your energy and protect you so that you're not being drained by others and that you're staying in your own energy. And that is a whole topic that I can do a lot of different videos on. But intention does matter and intention does work. And if you want to learn more about those techniques, you can check out my energy practices guide that is linked in my bio. So, I want to talk about a few different examples and techniques that you can use to help yourself as you become more sensitive to energy. So, one of the things is as you become more sensitive to energy, you're going to become more aware of, just how draining being in crowds can be. So, one of the techniques that you can do during this time is you can either shop early or shop late to try to avoid being around a bunch of different people because you're becoming more sensitive to energy, and being exposed to a whole bunch of different people at this time can be overwhelming. And so until you learn how to navigate it, and even so, even during certain periods of my own awakening, it doesn't matter what I do. I really just have to make sure that I'm not being around a bunch of people. And so, you really have to become more self aware of your own energy and your own capabilities of interactions. And the other thing that you can do to avoid crowds, of course, is to shop online or see if you can have an online or utilize a delivery service. So, when it comes to managing energy and being in airports, one of the things that I would do is I would go to a restaurant at the airport and I would find a booth that was facing the window that I could look out and, if it's not facing the window, it's, contained to where I'm not seeing anybody else. I'm not seeing the crowds of people rush by. I'm not constantly being stimulated by them, and just stay there until, it's time for your flight to leave. Another thing that you may experience is being overwhelmed when you're driving. So I remember at certain points during my awakening, I would be driving down the road and I almost felt like I was floating. It was very unnerving. And this is something that you know, I would say I probably shouldn't have even been driving that vehicle. I mean, it was the weirdest thing. And so I'll talk about some of the techniques that you can do with that, but here's one I want to tell you about first. One is I would try putting on relaxing music. Try 432 hertz. You can also try listening to spa music, classical music, anything that can kind of help things from you being overstimulated. So if you're, feeling like the cars are just like driving by, at least, when you're hearing that music, it can kind of get you in a more calm state, get you more centered. And then when it comes to psychic abilities, I will say that when your third eye starts to open up or when you start to have psychic abilities, you may start to experience things like seeing something out of the corner of your eye or maybe hearing disembodied voices. Now, I know that there's different things that, these could be caused by, so always make sure you see a medical professional for any health concerns. But when you start to have some of these abilities open up, it can be very overwhelming. And one of the things that I notice a lot of times with people that are starting to open up their abilities is their eyes look kind of dilated to me. It's like they're taking in too much information. Their upper chakras are too open. Now, again, I know dilated eyes can be caused by a lot of different things, but Sometimes I think this is what's happening with people. They're being overwhelmed and they haven't figured out necessarily how to manage that energy that they're receiving. So, some of the things that you can do are you can ground yourself outside. That is probably the best technique. And what you can do is just go outside, stand outside barefoot on the ground, and I would stand there for at least 10 minutes. It would be good if you could do that daily. And best would be if you could go out there early in the morning just as the sun is rising and kind of face the sun. Now, not look directly in the sun, but getting sunlight in your eyes early in the morning helps with your melatonin so that you're able to sleep better at night. So you're doing grounding and you're also helping yourself, get better balance that way. Another thing that you can do are you can use grounding crystals. So grounding crystals are things like this black tourmaline is one. This is raw black tourmaline. I always keep one of these by my computer, on my nightstand, and in my purse. I always keep them. I think black tourmaline is, if you're sensitive to energy, everybody should have it. You can also wear black tourmaline if you want. This is a crystal bracelet. But black tourmaline is a really good grounding crystal. You can just hold on to it, especially if you feel like at night and you just feel like you're too much in your head or whatever, you can, just hold this and, just notice yourself calming down. Also in traffic, if you feel like you're overwhelmed, you can use this. The other crystals that you can use are smoky quartz, hematite, and red jasper. And I would say that, I'll have to do more videos on how crystals work, but the grounding crystals are really something that a lot of people, you should own because they are essential, I think. And, my background is in science, but I'm very open-minded. And so I totally 100% believe in the power of crystals. Um, and you can order these if you are interested in my crystal shop online. The other thing that's really good to do when you want to get more into your body and get more grounded is to eat grounding vegetables. So I think that's why a lot of us crave potatoes is because we really need that grounding energy. You can also use sweet potatoes. You can try beets or carrots. You can just, make a whole sheet of roasted vegetables for the week and, eat those throughout the week to help you. And then the other technique that I was going to talk about is you can just visualize for grounding. You can just imagine a root coming out from your body all the way down to the ground and going into the ground and kind of grabbing it. I think that will help you get balanced. And that is a good technique for if you're driving by chance and you start to feel that you're like, kind of in a video game. That's what I used to feel like. But a lot of times when we're ungrounded, when we have these different techniques that we can try to help us get more centered and balanced, it's really going to help you along the spiritual journey because I think, it opens up so much. It opens us up to becoming, more aware of all these different ideas, and it can just be completely overwhelming. So it's really good to have tools and techniques that you can use to help you get more grounded during this process. So I hope you found this helpful. If you would like to follow, make sure to just subscribe. I talk about all sorts of different spiritual topics on this channel. See you at the next one.